Hello. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our March meeting of our Vermont Early Childhood State Advisory Council. We have some new technology in the room today that we are testing out. So for those of you who are virtual, can you give me a wave if you can hear us okay? Beautiful. So we have you on the screen in the front of the room, and we have our board around the table. We have several people who are on the outskirts of the room that you might not be able to see, but you might be able to with our wide lens. But we're really happy to have you. I'm Morgan Crossman. I'm the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures, and it's been 3 years since we've brought the State Advisory Council together in person. So we are thrilled to be having a little bit of a party in the room today, but also really happy to have you all that are virtual as well. So the goals for today are around relationship building. It's to meet each other as State Advisory Council members, to be able to spend time, do some networking. We recognize that for the last 3 years, those of you who have been on the board might have not known who else was on the board at all times. And there were a lot of transitions. So really wanting to bring people together, develop those relationships, orient a new team of people to the role, the scope of work, and talk about some of the changes that we have on the board, both from our state agency leaders, but also some transitions in our at-large members. So for anyone who is joining via Zoom today, I'm going to ask that you make an introduction into the chat bar. And again, let us know at any point if you're having trouble hearing us. And I think that we'll have Beth and Anna monitoring the Zoom today. So if you have questions or you're looking to engage in our discussion, we will definitely create space for that, but also use the virtual functions as you normally would in our meeting. For the SAC members who are on Zoom, we do want to ask that you keep your video on at all times if possible. And when we are calling for votes, we're going to ask that everybody who is not a State Advisory Council member who is on Zoom to turn their cameras off. And as with all of our SAC meetings, we want to start with a mindful moment. I do not want to ask that everyone turn off their cameras or close their eyes today, but we do want to reorient everyone to the vision that we have for our system that we've articulated through the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. And that vision is that in the year 2026, a child is born to a family in Vermont. We will call her baby Mariah. Vermont's a state where all children and families are accepted for who they are, and we support this child from the very start, all the way through their development and education. This child thrives with the loving care of her parents and caregivers. Her family is safe and stable in their home and have food in their fridge today and on the horizon. Baby Mariah's parents use paid family leave and home visiting to support the physical and mental health of both parents and baby. The family is connected to their diverse community and can access services, resources, and the support they need, including but not limited to high-quality childcare, a faith community, mental health support, healthy food, and jobs. Mariah grows into a toddler, preschooler, and eventually transitions into the local elementary school. She's resilient to navigate even the most difficult days she will face. Mariah does not yet know there's a community holding her and her family through a seamless system of support. This is a system where all children have a healthy start, where families and communities play a leading role in children's well-being, where families have access to high-quality opportunities that meet their needs, and where the early childhood system is integrated, well-resourced, and data-informed. This is the future. So bringing us all together today, this is what we're working towards by 2026. Is systems change fast? Not so much, right? We know that this is a very long process of how we are transforming the system to meet the needs of kids and families across the state of Vermont. So we are going to start today's meeting with paired questions and discussion. Really, it's about connection. What is bringing you to this work, and what is a part of the system that you're most passionate about improving through your role on the State Advisory Council or through your role in the system? So for those of you in the room, again, the prompt is, what are you most passionate about improving? What brings you to this work? And how do you want to create change through your role on the SAC? And we're going to ask those of you who are on Zoom to be doing the same. So you have about 2 minutes. I'm a liar. You have about 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes. Awesome. Good to see you all. All right, so we wanted to have just a little bit of connection time. I know that not everyone was able to be here for lunch, but we're excited to have a lot of you back in person and those of you joining via Zoom. I am going to turn it over to Floor, our private co-chair, to do a state advisory council roll call. And this is for the current voting members. And if your name is called, that means you are a current voting member. And if we miss you and you think you're a current voting member, just flag that for us.
And if I mispronounce your name, please come at the end and let me know, because I would like to get everybody. Right, good afternoon. My name is Flor Diaz-Smith, and I serve on behalf of the Vermont School Boards Association and as the private co-chair of the SAC. We're going to invite all our members to introduce themselves via roll call. We will start with those in the Zoom call and then the people here in person. That's okay with you guys. Meg Porcello, Agency of Education. Meg, are you with us?
She's not on.
Not on, okay. Jessica from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Not on.
Okay.
Sharon.
Sharon. Not on you?
Yeah.
Yes, Sharon, okay. Sharon Harrington, Vermont Association of Education of Young Children.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sharon Harrington. I'm serving as the interim executive director at the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children.
Thank you, Sharon. Dr. Ashley Miller.
Don't see her. Lexi's on.
Are you done me to call Lexi now?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Lexi,
Hi, I'm Alexis Duquette, advocate.
you just got cut off, Lexi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Lexi Duquette. I'm an advocate.
Thank you. Okay, and now we're gonna move right into.
Paul Dragon is on.
Okay,
You want to Paul and then Ruth Hardy and Erica Radke.
sorry guys, I had you guys as in person. So Paul Dragon,
He was.
okay.
He was there. Just start saying, Paul.
No, he's there now.
Erica, well,
Ruth,
Ruth. Or either.
Ruth, are you with us?
She's listening.
Yes, sorry.
Erica Radke is the last one. to introduce.
Erica,
Hello,
Eric.
I'm here.
the other yours. All right, so now I can move into the
Yeah,
person,
go ahead.
okay. Cheryl,
Room gets easier. Cheryl Wilcox, Department of Mental Health. I'm the co-chair. It's my last co-chair meeting. Or I'm still staying on the council, so don't be too sad. But lovely to see you all in person.
talk about that. Shayla,
Hi, Shayla Livingston. I'm the policy director for the Agency of Human Services, and this is my first meeting. I'm replacing Sarah Treckle.
your person, Jen.
Hi, Janet McLaughlin, and I'm newly the Deputy Commissioner for the Child Development Division at the Department of Children and Families. And this is my third go around on the SAC, or my third hat, I guess, that I've been wearing as an SAC member. So glad to be back with you.
Thank you for being here. Elisa,
Hi, everyone. I'm Elisa Stolberg. I'm the Maternal and Child Health Director at the Vermont Department of Health.
Renee,
Hey, everyone. Renee Kelly, Director, Vermont Head Start Collaboration Office with the Child Development Division.
for being here. Susanna, I don't see Susanna, is she on
No.
the line? No, okay. Susanna Party. Jessica?
Hi, I'm Jessica Brumstead. I'm the state rep from Shelburne and St. George, and I'm also the vice chair of the House Human Services Committee.
Thank you for being here. Becca,
Hi, everybody. I'm Becca Webb. I am a UPK coordinator, and I kind of sit in that place of early childhood ed and early childhood special ed.
Eddie,
Hi, Eddie Gale. I'm with the A.D. Henderson Foundation, and my apologies, I need to get my son to Newport by 4 o'clock, which means I leave now.
thank you for
Good to
being
see
here.
you. Let's not wait another 3 years.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
get together in person.
Nice to be in person. Amy,
Amy Johnson, Director of the Parent Child Center of NCSS, representing the Vermont Parent Child Center Network for my last meeting.
Oh.
so thank you for being here. Christy,
Hi, I'm Christy Swenson. I represent Head Start.
And Libby?
I'm Libby Dalian. I'm here as a parent representative.
And Paul. Oh, we already said, it's not being third. Second call.
My question, so if he wants to come on.
Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
there you go. Oh, there you are.
Oh, there.
Paul, do you want to introduce yourself? I don't think you can hear
I'm sorry, are you saying Paul?
it. Yes, Paul.
Oh, yes, hi, sorry, and I had to step away, so I do apologize. Paul Dragon, I'm with the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. We're a community action program, one of 5 in Vermont, and we have a range of programs, including a very large Head Start program. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Mike,
Mike Draith, Vermont Principals Association.
Heather,
I'm Heather Wilcoxon. I'm the Assistant Children's Division Director for HCRS.
Dimitri,
Hi, Dimitri Garter. I'm the business rep on the State Advisory Council.
okay, and then we have our 3 non-voting members. I think soon we already got here.
Yeah, Kendall and Miranda are not able to be here. So.
No, we're all set.
Yep. So just so folks know, the way that the State Advisory Council runs, we have 23 voting members. We also have 3 non-voting members. One is Kendall Smith from the governor's office, and then the other 2 deputy commissioners from the Department for Children and Families. So Erica Radke and Miranda Gray serve as non-voting members to make sure that we have representation of all the agencies, departments, and divisions that support kids and families. Because we have a lot of people in virtual space, but also in the physical space that are not on the board, we do want to take just a minute to let everyone else know who's in the room. So I'm going to just quickly call on folks. I would love to have you stand, quickly provide your name and organization. So I'm going to start with Katie.
I'm Katie Mobs. I'm the office manager for Building Bright Futures. Nice to see you all.
Carol Langdon, I'm the executive director at Memorial Family Center. And unless I really mess things up, I'll be jumping in as the rep for the parent child.
Beth Trusansky, deputy director of Building Bright Futures.
Chris Case, the new CDD director of policy and plan as of today.
Manager for media. Carla Senecal, regional manager for Addison, Rutland, Bennington County. Gloria Casino, data and policy manager for media.
Matt Levin, executive director of the Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance.
Laura Levinson, research and data director at Building Bright Futures. Dawn Rouse, child development division director of statewide systems.
Awesome. So we have such an incredible group, both in person and virtually today. I'm not going to have those of you who are virtual do the introductions, but we can all see your names and or faces on our screen. So thank you for being here today. We also want to just recognize that all of our work, especially in the early childhood system, is based on relationships and building strong relationships with all of the different partners and stakeholders. And I just want to acknowledge that there are so many public transitions of our agency representatives across the board that impact our work. So I want to just walk you through some of those transitions to make sure you know, again, who's in the space, who's in the virtual space, who are the points of contact across our agencies that impact the State Advisory Council. Our public members are not term limited positions. So they are appointed by the secretary of their respective agency, the commissioner of their department, the speaker of the House, the Senate pro tem. And again, these are all appointed positions that don't have term limits. So you may see people transitioning between roles, but not necessarily leave their roles. So some of those transitions, first, Shayla is our new representative from the Agency of Human Services. So we have a secretary's seat, and Shayla is the new designee for Jenny Samuelson. Chris Winters is the DCF commissioner at this moment, and he has deputized Janet as the CDD deputy commissioner. And as I mentioned before, we really want to have representation of all of those departments and divisions. So we have 2 non-voting seats. Miranda Gray, who was the CDD deputy, is now transitioned to be the deputy commissioner for economic services. And she also now holds a non-voting seat. The Agency of Education, Secretary Dan French has a seat. His designee was formerly Kate Rogers, and after that, Chris Case. Kate has retired and Chris has transitioned to be supporting in the CDD policy director role. So we're still awaiting the formal designee from the Agency of Education. We have some major votes today happening. For those of you who are new to the board, we do have voting membership. Those of you who had your names called, you already hold a voting seat, even if this is your first meeting, if you are an appointed position. But Cheryl will be leaving us as the public co-chair of the board. We'll talk a little bit more about that transition a little bit later. We also have the transition of the Vermont AUIC representative. So as Janet transitioned into the CDD deputy role, we now have Sharon Harrington holding the remainder of the Vermont AUIC seat. Any transitions that I have missed, state government friend?
I just miss being virtual so I can like GIF something that's very dizzy or like I can't do that here in person. It's the one piece I'm missing from virtual meetings. I can't throw GIFs.
Yes.
In the chat.
I know. So it does feel a little bit like an in-person and virtual party where folks are actually getting to either meet each other or reconnect after a long period of time. But we're excited to have an opportunity to meet with all of these new agency leaders who are either new to the group or just transitioning into a new seat. It really provides an opportunity for relationship building and thinking about how we do the work better together. So we're going to throw our slide deck back up on the virtual screen. And I want to draw everyone's attention in that direction. A part of what we want to do during this meeting is reorient everyone to the role of the State Advisory Council of Building Bright Futures based on what our charge is in state and federal statutes.
One
more thing. Meg herself.
Yeah.
Yes, she has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. No, she's in the top right. So
Yeah.
Meg, I do see that you're there and I would love to have you introduce yourself from the Agency of Education.
I am so sorry. You have, anyway, I have lots of really good, solid excuses, but yes, I am Meg Porcella. I'm the interim director of the Student Support Services Division. And actually, if you look around the room at Chris Case, this is all his fault. So I am here and yeah, I apologize for getting my wires so very, very crossed with this meeting.
No, we are pleased to have you. So we are going to have you serve as the Agency of Education's designee for voting purposes today. So thank you for being here. All right, now we're going to share our screen and we already walked you through our collective vision. But I think it's really important to ground ourselves in the charge and the work. Building Bright Futures as an entity is named in Title 33, Chapter 46 as Vermont's Early Childhood State Advisory Council. Our mission is to improve the well-being of children and families in Vermont by using evidence to inform policy and bringing voices together to discuss critical challenges and problem solve. Our entity was specifically created outside of state government to hold the vision and strategic plan for Vermont's early childhood system. And in 2020, we reset that vision and the scope of work through the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. And that vision is to be an integrated continuum of comprehensive, high-quality services that's equitable, accessible, and will improve outcomes for each and every Vermont child in the prenatal period through age 8 and their families. Not a small scope of work that we have set out to have be our vision, but we're really excited to be about halfway through that vision and we have another couple of years to really see what we can do. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are virtual, we often find that it's really hard for folks to know what our actual board makeup looks like. We are a public-private partnership, which means we have members of the administration, we have members of the House and the Senate, as well as a range of leaders, family members, and stakeholders across the state of Vermont who care deeply and have significant roles to play related to children and families. So this is the board as of this moment in time. The board will change as of 3 o'clock today, but this is the current voting membership, and we are so psyched to have such a strong, committed, passionate group of ambassadors for kids and families in the state. Next slide, please. All right, so what you're seeing on the screen right now is our collective vision for Vermont's early childhood system outlined in the VCAP. On the right side of the screen, you are seeing the way we think about this early childhood system, which is this interconnected, interdependent visual that shows that children are situated within families and within communities and within this broader system that supports them. And we've set out 4 strategic goals that we're working towards. All children have a healthy start. Families and communities play a leading role. That all children and families have access to equitable opportunities that meet their needs, and that our system will be integrated, well-resourced, and data informed. And you heard when we did the mindful moment that we walked you through this vignette of what this would look like for a child in 2026. I think we've made tremendous progress in the last 2.5 years. We still have a little bit of work to do to reach that vision and recognize that this is a living plan. This is something that we will revision together and as a network over the next couple of years with the support of the preschool development grant. Next slide, please. So this visual shows the entire Building Bright Futures network. And when we talk about BBF, again, we were created as a nonpartisan independent organization that has multiple layers to support our advisory ability, but also accountability within Vermont's early childhood system. We have committed to holding children and families at the center of all of our work, and that we will use evidence and data and then model using evidence and data to drive decision-making across the levels of our network. As we are thinking about this network, we hold that vision and strategic plan, but what that means is that we maintain stability when the system is moving, which it always is, right? So our job is to say, if there's transition in the legislature, if there's transition in state government, that we are holding the line and the vision and holding the system accountable to that vision. We recognize that there's a very complex system of governance and administration across the departments and divisions, and this network is what holds that system accountable. So if some member of this network, some level of this network isn't able to follow through or be continuing to move towards that vision, it's our responsibility to be communicating that with them, with other decision makers, to make sure that we're in line with that vision. When we're looking at the network slide, how many of you know what this infrastructure looks like? Our 12 regional council strategic plan committees. Does everybody feel like they have a solid sense of what this looks like? Amazing. So our 12 regional councils are the ones that are identifying needs and challenges on the ground and elevating the priority areas. We have 7 strategic plan committees that are actively monitoring where we are and where we need to head in the next year related to our strategic goals. You all in this room and on the screen are the 23 governor appointed state advisory council membership. The public partners that you saw on the left-hand side of our screen make up the early childhood interagency coordinating team. So on a monthly basis, those partners are coming together across their sectors to say, here are the major challenges we're facing, here are the priorities, how are we integrating, aligning, and making progress in strategic areas. And our policymakers are those who are in positions of authority and decision-making across our system. It may be the legislature, it may be the administration or the governor's team. So we really use this entire network to build recommendations, to be able to drive and then hold the system accountable. Next slide. I always want to bring up our regional council network and to show you what this network looks like. So on an annual basis, our regional councils are identifying the top 2 needs and priorities of the people and the communities they serve. This is by no way, shape, or form a comprehensive look of all of the needs. It is us really trying to get them to say, here are the top 2, and there could be a top 5 or a top 10 at any given time. But what you're seeing here is that we have such a robust network of partners that are coming together within regions to say, here are the needs and challenges. Here's where there's regional variation across the state. And here's where we have some alignment in some of these big statewide challenges. So these were the priorities in 2022. We are about to embark on our next round of priority setting within our regional councils. Next slide, please. So what is the role of our state advisory council? And you're seeing my fierce little toddler and her best friend in the left-hand corner of the screen up there. What is your role as a board and what is our role as a Building Bright Futures network? Again, we're charged with monitoring the vision and strategic plan for the system. We are to be developing those strategic plans based on data, based on periodic needs assessments, based on continuously identifying the needs and challenges of kids and families, and really using that data to inform decision-making. As a network, we produce the State of Vermont's Children Report, we produce policy briefs, we produce webinars over the course of the year that help support that effort. We are charged in statute with coordinating and aligning initiatives and budgets within and across state government. So you'll see that within this last year, we produced an early childhood budget for the first time in the last 5 years to help support understanding of those priorities. We are charged with elevating voice through our regional councils and really prioritizing family engagement and serving as the primary advisor to Vermont's governor and the legislature on the well-being of kids and families. The advisement happens in a million different ways at all times, right? So sometimes it's this board coming together and saying, here are the challenges, how do we move forward? Sometimes it's formally endorsed state advisory council recommendations. Sometimes it's through ECICT saying, here are all the challenges and how are we coming together to move and make progress. We also bring together the private members of this board on, I think, a quarterly basis at this point to do the same type of work. What are the things that we all need to know about to inform how we take the next step? It also happens in one-on-one meetings in terms of advisement with whether it's a member of the governor's team or members of the legislative branch. It's an incredibly robust amount of work that happens on an annual basis. I think one of the really cool stats that I want to provide you all is that last year we documented that the Building Bright Futures Network advised 36 times over the course of 1 year. We are just at crossover and we've already advised 54 times. So the amount of work that happens in this boardroom within our different networks to make sure that we're elevating and advising our legislature and the governor, it is really robust and you're having a significant impact. So I want us to break out into some discussion, both with our current SAC members, past SAC members. And I think, again, my reminder to this group is that all of our work is happening because of the strong relationships that we've built with each other. And one of the best quotes that we've been discussing in the last couple of months is a collective impact quote, which is change moves at the speed of trust. And relationships are really at the cornerstone of all we do. So we want to take the next 20 to 30 minutes as a full group to discuss what are the levers that our state advisory council can use to make change, and where have you seen that change in the last year? So whether it's the relationships that have been built, is it the state advisory council recommendations that you've seen make the biggest change? Is it testimony? Is it data? Is it certain levels of the network? What are all of the different levers? What have you found to be the most important components of this work? And how can we be educating each other and new members about what that role of responsibility is? So I'm going to pause and want to open the floor to any of the current or past board members, any of you who are virtually. And I think we want to start actually with those who are on Zoom to make sure that you get a chance to speak. So if anyone on Zoom who has been a past state advisory council member or is a current state advisory council member, anything you would share about, again, the levers of change that the SAC can use and what you found to be the most kind of important components of this work. Go ahead, Paul.
I can just start. I'll be brief. What I've really appreciated is, CVOEO has 9 different programs, and we do a lot of different work, a lot of emergent work, getting people housed, getting people food, and then a lot of the longer term work. And that's moving people out of poverty. So when I think of Building Bright Futures, what it's helped us do, it's really helped us to look at the system and the systems change, which we don't have necessarily enough time or expertise to work on that, because in community action, we're really struggling to keep up with the program and the program development and just doing that work on a daily basis. And we know that we can't do that work alone. We need systems change. So that's what I really appreciated. I've appreciated the advocacy, the education, the focus on moving upstream and making sure that our children are well. So when we had this notion of solving family homelessness and presenting it to BBF and then having that rounded out with all the other work that's being done in the legislature to make sure that our kids and our families are secure and safe, that is protecting our future and hopefully making all of our collective work a little bit easier in the future. So all the legislation, the advocacy, the education work, and that systems work for us as a community action program has been invaluable.
Thank you, Paul. I think one of the points that Paul made that I want to reiterate to folks is that Building Bright Futures charge is much broader than just childcare and early childhood education. And I hope you can see that by who we have around our board table. Our job is to be responsible for the entire early childhood system, which means all of the complex components, anybody that is really working to support children and families prenatal to age 8. Whether it's mental health, childcare, pre-K, nutrition, housing, all of these different programs. And it's a very wide range and a broad scope that's really critical to thinking about what it means to have a comprehensive system to support kids and families. Anyone else on Zoom that has formerly been a state advisory council member want to weigh in?
Just jump in very briefly. I would just notice that when you were sharing the map of regional priorities, that at least half of the regional councils focused on early childhood educator workforce development. And I know that the work that's happening at PPD and ELD, I just think that having this unified and intentional focus on this particular issue is so critical at this moment in time, and it has been for a while. And now I feel like there's really some intentional and strong collaborations to try to address this early childhood educator workforce. And I just think that that connects directly with Vermont AUIC and the work that we're trying to do as well. So I'm appreciative of that.
Thank you so much. It's so interesting because one of the things that you're calling attention to is the importance of having such a robust network. Our regional councils identified a very consistent statewide priority, an area of need. We saw our VCAP committees, specifically professional preparation and development, and our early learning and development committees tackle that as well. And then we saw recommendations come up to the State Advisory Council for your endorsement. So again, really looking at this robust 450-person network that's coming together to say, here's what we need to do to improve outcomes for kids and families. Anyone else on Zoom before we turn it to the room? Okay, we'll come back to you, I promise. Those of you in the room, current board members, past board members.
So for me, as a legislator, all legislators are individually, I think, grounded by what happens in their community. That's how they get elected, and that's how they understand what's on everyone's mind. But then when they get into the big, what could I say, the
bullpen.
Yeah.
The bullpen. Climb in that bullpen.
When we walk onto the floor, there are 150 members in the House and 30 members in the Senate, and we all represent Vermonters. But how on earth do we know how all Vermonters feel about issues? I know my district of Shelburne is pretty purple, so it's sort of in between. They are conservative on some issues, liberal on other issues, and it's often difficult to figure out where to land. And then when you start really working on policy like early childhood, how do you really understand how people in the Northeast Kingdom feel, how people in Southern Vermont feel, how people in Chittenden County feel, right? I mean, I may represent Shelburne and St. George, but that doesn't mean I really understand how people in Chittenden County feel. And so what I absolutely love about Building Bright Futures and being involved, even before I was a member of the State Advisory Committee, is that I can go to Building Bright Futures and see things like this that are so important to our work, to be able to see how are people feeling everywhere. And it's not just quantitative, it's qualitative. It has quality associated with it. It has conversations. It's not all numbers. The 12 regional councils makes it possible for us to really hear what's going on. My first regional council that I attended was in Addison County. And I remember there was a very big issue there around pre-K and could they access it where they work or where they live? It was very big and it was facilitated by Building Bright Futures. And for me, that's what made it so important. Rather than just hearing from one person at a time in that room, we had Building Bright Futures bringing that information together in a way that we could hear it. And as a member of the Government Accountability Committee that I've been on for, this was my 7th year, I actually had it sunsetted this year because it's not about one moment in time, which is what the Government Accountability Committee did. And Building Bright Futures really taught me that it is an evolving science. It doesn't just happen. You can't just look at the statistics. You have to be able to understand the big picture, and that looking at systems and data is what truly can inform policy that is good policy that works. And I am incredibly grateful for my participation on this committee that has helped me hopefully teach our legislators in this coming year, which is how to be accountable, not only as committees and the body, but as individuals inside of the legislature. And so I believe that part of that is by being here and hearing what's going on. So that's it.
Thank you. Others?
I can jump in. I think I'm really reflecting on that, particularly over the last 2 years. I think I'm on year 3 as an SAC member, but particularly the last 2 years, that piece of real relationships, the number of times, right? Like being a UPK coordinator, you talk to everybody about everything, but you don't really form deep relationships. And the number of times that like I've called up Mike and been like, hey, we're talking about this in the meeting, like, can we connect on this? Or that I connect with the parent-child centers or, our legislators. And really the piece of when you had up the multitude of touch points, right? The multitudes of ways that we operate as a BBF team. Just the number of ways that I've connected with people, which has made my work and hopefully like others' work stronger. Whether it's data or knowing somebody on the other end of the phone or having a hard conversation or being like, hey, I need you to throw up that GIF in the corner that we're all talking about the right thing.
Great reflections. Others feeling that same level of connection by being a part of the board and making those kind of work connections as well.
I think as a parent-child center director and part of the network, we do direct service, but we also do system change work. And we touch all different parts of this really complicated, large system of early childhood. And so we have to know so much and keep so much in our heads, and it's really hard to do. And I know if I walk into the State House to testify, somebody's going to find me and ask me about something rogue that I don't know anything about because I haven't had time to look into it. So I'm glad you brought up that example. I called Becca and said, tell me about this 117-page bill, because when I walk in, somebody's going to ask me something and I haven't looked at it at all and I need to know. So I think that's happened a lot over the past 3+ years that I've been on the board, been able to make connections, reach out to people and learn from others so that I feel like I don't have to gather all that knowledge and learn all of that in a silo, which is huge. And also this report is amazing. I use this when I write testimonies. So this is another piece that I find so phenomenal and very helpful to the work.
I would add, of what Amy is saying, as someone who doesn't do the direct service work anymore and is working on systems change, which can feel very, very slow. And then also at other times really fast, like trying to catch up to things happening. I think the value of being at this table has been the relationships and hearing what's happening on the ground, because I don't ever want to sit in my seat and be talking about what's needed without knowing that's what's needed. And I think the phenomenal coordination work that happened around the preschool development grant that is going to be touching so many people in Vermont is just phenomenal. When I think of the investments for mental health and for young children, and even the conversation about mental health, like I feel like over the years has evolved. When I think about young children, people know mental health means something, and it's from the very beginning. And that conversation has changed tremendously while I've been at this table and the way people talk about it. I was at the early childhood day at the legislature a couple weeks ago, and my son is a freshman in college. And I was sitting next to someone, and we both knew we knew each other. And we started talking, and she has her own business, and I have home daycare. And I said, "How did you get into your own business?" And she started talking. And she had my son next door at Heartworks when he was 3, and he's 19. And I remember her from the after school program, and I feel like it was such a gift that he was able to be there and get what he needed. And also the tremendous expense. Heartworks was amazing. We could not have afforded it, except we had a subsidy because we had gone through an adoption with our son. So I think the fact that we talk about what families need and what it should look like, and the support from early on is really important. And this is the table that I feel like it happens at, and that we can talk through all different aspects and really get to a place where we think there's going to be value for children and families in Vermont. As someone who hopes that my 3 young adult children will stay in Vermont, it makes me hopeful.
I feel the same way, that, your quote at the end that, change moves at the speed of trust. I feel like this table kind of represents that, like I think in this past 3 years, there's been a lot of good change and the partnerships across public and private, that common understanding of, what is best for all kids and how we can all help those things together. I feel like we're a little bit like the owl, like you guys that are like looking, like literally looking all around, but keeping the system accountable, and most importantly, asking good questions, right? And coming back to us and then going back and asking good questions, not preaching, right? Like asking the good questions. And it's, it's in the critical needs, children and families, right? So not asking the good questions just to ask questions, just like keeping the energy, and, because it's so easy to get distracted in what we all do. And but I still feel like I have much to learn, right? Like it's just every year it's a little bit, every year's a little bit different, people change, and I still yet to be able to be at regional meeting, regional council meeting tomorrow. Like how can we best be part of this board, continue to do critical work.
So one of the things that Flora is bringing up is there are still so many opportunities for us as a board and as a network to lean into to do the work better and stronger. And I would love to hear from any of you, if you're newer to the table, what are those opportunities for us as a collective board to really be thinking about for the next year? Where can we improve? I've heard our executive board, actually raise your hand if you're on the executive board so that people can see who the executive board is. These are the current slate of executive board members who serve as advisors to Beth and myself as we are moving all of the work forward and really supporting operations. But, one of the things that I've heard them say in this last year is that this work is strong, but it's now brave. How do we do that well for the coming year? How do we keep moving into a space that is truly data informed and brave, and pushing the envelope on what is important, what is possible, what is, within our scope?
What do you mean it's not brave? Yeah.
I think it is brave.
It
I
is
think that
brave.
they've seen that transition. I'd actually love to open it to the 4 of you. When you've talked about the board being in a brave space, what does that mean?
to taking more, like, we used to say, safe space, you know, everybody can talk about, but being brave is like what we did this year with our recommendations, right? Like, we all agree that having a direct direction for the first time, having something really direct, even if it was housing, was really important, right? So we were brave, it was data informed, so, you know, that's being brave. It's not just being safe, right? Like being able to ask questions that you don't know, maybe somebody across the table doesn't feel the same way, but still being able to be respectful and ask that hard question, right? So that we can all learn about the conversation, holding that space,
Well,
that brave space.
Can I
Yeah, go
tag
ahead.
in?
Yeah.
I think in my history too with BBF, you always hear us talk about BBF as a neutral convener. And this concept around what does it mean to be neutral? And in what moments, you know, it's that passivity, right? It's like, if you're not with us, then you're in our way. Like for folks who've heard Marika Porter talk about her experience, and that, like, if you're not with us and you're not helping us, like, you got to move. And historically on the part of BBF, I think it's been tricky to play this neutral place, and neutral was perceived as no opinion. And I think in the last few years, we've stepped up to the plate to say, no, neutral means we set the table and we have clear norms and guidelines, and we're encouraging communication and people expressing different viewpoints. But when we know what's best for kids and families, when that's informed by the data, it's informed by the voices at the table, it's informed by the stories, then we're going to make a move on it. It's not just sit tight because we don't want to take action in worrying that we might offend a party. And I think that's the piece where relationships are so important, because there are going to be times where, whether it's the organizations that we sit in or these other systems, that we have competing priorities or competing viewpoints. And that's just a fact. But to have those relationships and to keep coming back to, we all want what's best for kids and families. It might look different. We might have different strategies, but our outcome is the same. That, I think, is what has allowed us to be in a position where we can put forward really brave recommendations that take a stance and not be worried about the perception of BBF not being seen as neutral, or that folks are going to pick up their marbles and go home because we took a stand on an issue that they disagree with. So I think for my perspective, being brave is that recognizing a difference between what it means to be neutral and convening, but also being able to do what's right in the moment. Other reflections about opportunities for the board in the next year?
Maybe. Well, I was just gonna say, obviously I still feel very new to the council in general, but I think something I really appreciate both through my role and through the regional work that you do is the opportunity to bring in voices from people who wouldn't be part of the everyday conversation, but will be impacted by it. Because I think it's easy to feel like, oh, that's what's happening in the government. I have no control over it. I can go vote once a year and that's it. But to be able to really share your ideas and voices, and even since I've started talking to, people at my daughter's preschool or friends who work in public schools about my work on the committee, they have so many great ideas and they get really excited about, oh, there's a potential I could, get something shared or have my voice heard. So I appreciate that piece of it a lot.
I think the one thing around what can we think about in this next year, I'm just really mindful of what you said earlier about and the environment that we're in, the focus is on care and education, but it's so much more. And for me, even Sharon, I don't know how loud I was talking to the owl, but as you were talking about workforce and that, yes, the workforce of early educators is important, but there's so many other components of workforce when we're talking about mental health and we're talking about nutrition or all of these pieces. And so for me, my hope is that we can, while we know that early care and education is sucking a lot of oxygen out of the room, if we can continue to hold a mirror up and remind folks that there's more to the early childhood system than just early care and education. And it is about health, and it is about prevention and mental health and nutrition and these pieces. It's moving it more upstream. It's being preventative. And so I think it's hard to not get sucked into just thinking about early care and education. But I guess my hope for the year is that we can push ourselves to, in whatever topics we're exploring, is
how does, if we find ourselves talking about early care and education, like what are the other impacts and how can we step back a little bit to, so we're not just focusing in there.
Morgan, I want to add one more thing to back off Libby. I think what Libby said around talking to other people and connections, that's a piece that we really need to remember as a board, that we all have our own organizational connections, but it's also being able to, like, I have conversations with the programs that we partner with, and they're like, oh, I'm going to bring that up here. Or, they're like, oh, I want to know a little bit more about that. So it's not just the connections amongst this group, but it's the like, oh, I know who the reps on the parent committee are, and I can connect a parent with them to get their voices heard. So it's to me, BBF and this board in particular are like, we were talking in our small group about like, the hubs, right? And so this is like the hubs that connect outwards, the webs that connect outwards.
Absolutely. And so everyone on the board is serving as an ambassador to your respective, whatever that group is, if it's an entity, if it's an organization, if it's families. And a part of the role is to bring your knowledge and expertise and your constituents, whomever they are, their voices and reflect them at the table. The other piece, and a lot of you, especially from the administration, right, are sitting here in a role where you are active listeners. So you're not always bringing here's what we're doing in the vision. You're bringing what you hear here back to say, okay, how do we think about this based on what we've heard at the board table? How do we think about this body of work? How does this inform how we move? Who do we need to connect with now that we've heard that to be able to create the change that we need? Any other final reflections from board members before we jump into some business?
I really wanted to say I like what you did there when you said web. I knew it was going to be lost not being on Zoom. I think, I'm still learning a lot what it's like to be a part of this group, and so often I'm fairly quiet and taking it in. But I think the main thing that is a takeaway for me, and I'll be working on really appreciating over this coming year, is just really removing the silos. And I heard that mentioned before, because I think it's really easy. So I work for HRS, I mentioned that earlier, but being part of a designated agency, focus on mental health. It's really easy to just focus on that unless there's a specific direct care need for specific cases that staff are supporting. And it's so hard for people to focus on their mental health with all these other needs, as are mentioned all the time at this table, without those things being met. So I appreciate the partnering with people at the table and the ability to build the connections as well. So that's my takeaway.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you all. I hope what you see as you look around the table is that you have content expertise across so many different areas. And that's the point, right? It's because none of us can actually create the full systems change without the other. So how do we utilize the relationships? How do you know who to call when you have testimony that is slightly outside of your area, but in someone else's? And how do you make those connections beforehand and then after to figure out what the follow-up is? So really wanting you all to recognize that you're not always going to have the same strategy for how to move the work forward. But if we can come back to the aligned vision piece, making those connections beforehand, making the call before testimony to be able to say, hey, I know that you have to show up this way. I want to make sure you know how I'm able to show up, and setting those expectations and not having it be from a place of defensiveness, but partnership, so that we are trying to, again, move the needle towards that vision. Awesome.
I would say that too is about bravery, to be able to say the hard stuff individually to folks. That helps them to sit up and go, oh, it's that hard, or it's that difficult. Like that's important. That's an important part for us as listeners too, because sometimes when you're listening, you don't always totally get it. You need it to be a little more forceful. And I feel like Building Bright Futures does that well without being angry, but rather just like, here's what you need to remember. Don't forget about this. And here's a way to that you might be able to do that. And I want to make sure you know what you're walking into. And that's really, really important. And I can't imagine doing my job without Building Bright Futures with me. It doesn't have to agree with me all the time, but sort of helping me to know what I'm walking into. And I think that's important. And also coming to the table and saying, look, we can't do this work without a little more support, both financially and in general. That's really important sometimes for us to hear, because everyone wants to tell us what they think we want to hear. And except the administration.
I was gonna say. Happy to share.
That's perfect. That's what I was thinking too.
One
ahead.
thing that we've been talking about is we have great diversity of thought around the board, but one of our goals also is to have diversity in our board and, slowly working to that. So we've been talking about it. So it's just there's one more goal. That we have.
Great. Oh my God. I was just going to offer too, I do feel like in terms of the shared understanding, I do think that the space that's created at this table or at the ECAP committees is the other place that I've engaged more, is it does help us figure out a little bit more where we might be talking past each other, right? Or we think we're talking about the same thing and it turns out we're not, or right, like we all think we are, there's some people think like, oh, there's agreement on something and then in those conversations we're surfacing that there's not, and even just that, obviously just that ends up being a really valuable contribution in surfacing what the disagreements are, even if we takes a little bit longer to get to what the resolution would be.
Absolutely. All right, well, there's plenty of work for us to do in the next year and even in the next half of our legislative session together. So that is exciting. I want to move us into board business, and I think I'm turning it over to Cheryl. We have a range of votes. So again, just so that everybody knows, state advisory council members with a current voting seat should be voting. So Shayla, Heather, Meg, Janet, Sharon, you all are in voting seats. Your appointments have already been made. You have a vote today. If you don't feel confident voting, you can abstain if you're feeling for any reason that you're not prepared to do that. And Amy, as an outgoing member, you still have voting privileges until the end of today's meeting as well. So you are also voting. All right, so Cheryl, I'll turn it over to you.
First one's easy. Easy
Yeah.
vote, I
Yeah.
promise. February meeting minutes. So looking for a motion to accept the February SAC meeting minutes that were attached to all the materials.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Renee made a motion. Second.
I'll
second. I have a lot of second. Libby, I'm gonna count you as second. All in favor? Aye. Looking for, yep, I saw some virtual hands. Anyone opposed? Anyone would like to abstain?
I'm gonna abstain. I wasn't here.
Fair enough. Shayla abstained. Good reason. All right. Like we were all set for meeting minutes.
Awesome. Okay, so now we have a couple of other series of votes. We have executive committee nominations and renominations. Again, executive committee, current slate of executive board members. Can you raise your hand or stand up so that everybody can see you?
I don't think. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So again, the executive committee serves as the primary advisors to myself and Beth as the executive and deputy directors to make sure that they are helping guide strategic vision, but also helping with the problem solving and any politics behind the scenes and supporting the organization from a financial management perspective, organization operations. Our executive committee has 6 seats. We currently have 4 at this moment. And I want to present a slate of nominations on behalf of myself and Beth. So the first is that Cheryl has been our co-chair of the State Advisory Council in the public seat. Again, public and private both means we have a public co-chair and a private co-chair, but then public and private members across the board. So the executive board, Beth and I would like to nominate Elisa Stahlberg as our SAC co-chair for a 2-year term on the executive committee, which would end March 31st, 2025. The second is that given some of our agency transitions to support continuity on the executive board and in leadership of the State Advisory Council, we are nominating an extension of Renee Kelly's executive committee term for 1 additional year. So she'll continue in her role as secretary through March 31st, 2024. And then just so that everybody knows who the other two are, Becca Webb serves as our treasurer and Flor Diaz-Smith as our private co-chair, so they will continue with their terms. So the voting language is that the Building Bright Future State Advisory Council, at the recommendation of the executive director and current executive board, moves to elect the aforementioned slate of officers to the executive committee. So I am opening the floor for a motion for that slate. Dimitri, and a second. I can second. Cheryl. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Awesome. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstained because I felt as if I should.
That's what I was thinking. Absolutely. I also feel like I should have, I feel like that's the right. Elisa can abstain if you would like to. Okay, so I'm willing, but as of the vote from the board, we have accepted the proposed slate of executive committee members. So for those of you who are outgoing representatives, thank you. And for those of you who are newly in our executive board, we're excited to have you. Okay, so that was just our executive board. I'm going to turn it back to Cheryl to do a next round of vote for our at-large membership.
Okay. I feel like I would like to say COVID thank for the reading glasses. I'm sure it's not even so I'm going to read this so I don't make a mess of it. The Building Bright Future State Advisory Council, at the recommendation of the Executive Committee, moves to elect the following at-large members, the Advisory Council, for a 3-year term ending March 31st, 2026. Carol Feingarten, I hope I said that. Thank you. Memorial Family Center, representing the Parent-Child Center. Carol's bio went out with the agenda. She's a longtime BBF partner involved with Lamoille Valley Regional Council and currently executive director of the Lamoille Family Center and member of the Vermont Parent-Child Center Network. So looking for someone to make a motion for the nomination.
I will so motion.
Thank you, Christy. Second. Amy. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. One opposed? Anyone who wants to or feels they need to abstain? Welcome, Carol. Do you have a baton, Amanda? Do you have something you can transfer?
One of the crown.
Noted for next March. What promise do we need for the State Advisory Council? Amazing. So again, congratulations to our new SAC members and new executive board members. We're really, again, really excited to have such a strong board of ambassadors. And for those of you who are either leaving the board actually, or leaving a different role or transitioning into new roles, really looking for you to stay actively involved and continue to be ambassadors, to be able to come to this table in that space, to be able to elevate some of the major priorities and challenges. So thank you. We want to end today's meeting by doing some appreciations and acknowledgements of some of our transitions and outgoing members. Again, our board is a 23 governor appointed member body of public and private members. Our at-large members serve for about 3 years, but can have 2 consecutive terms. So some folks are leaving after 6 years, some are leaving after 3, some we try to keep around as long as possible, and hence have transitioned to multiple different roles and seats over the course of the time that we've had them. So we've had such incredible leadership across this board over the last, at the very least 4 years that I have been a part of the organization. I'm so proud of the body of work. But would love to have Flor start by doing some appreciation.
I'll start. So to my co-chair, to our co-chair, thank you for your leadership and kind guidance, Cheryl. This little, I'm gonna have to rip it because I can't get it out. This little succulent plant is a little thing, but the meaning that succulent plants embody has some of the characteristics that I think about you. You bring your tenacity, your strength, and your selfless love for all our children, and remind us about mental health too. Don't forget that. But we just so glad that you continue to be with us and continue to shine your light with us. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you. And Cheryl's still staying on board. So that is a wonderful, wonderful transition. Amy Johnson has been a critical member of our state advisory council and such a strong partner in this work. And Cheryl, I would love for you to be able to speak about Amy.
So as Amy said, Parent Child Center, and I feel like, I don't know how long I knew you before this board, but it was before the board. I will say it is knowing what you balance with both direct service and systems change. It is phenomenal. You have been a very committed member at this council, showing up, bringing your voice, bringing children's voices. And also just, Amy and I get to talk outside of this council because the work, the incredible respect and caring and sense of urgency you bring to what children and families need, and just the kindest way, is so inspiring. I always feel like I learn something when we talk, and it's been really lovely having you on this council.
So Amy or Cheryl, as outgoing either members or outgoing co-chairs in your role, is there anything that you would ask of the board or like to leave with the board as you are transitioning?
I really appreciate what Cheryl said earlier about being outside of direct service for a long time and using the folks at the table and other folks, other partnerships to really understand what's going on for children and families in regions and across the state. I just want to remind this group that that's so critical, that kind of the higher up you go, the more power you might have, but you really have to stay connected in some way to the children and families, because we are here in service of children and families. And I'm glad that you said that, and just a reminder that we might know a lot, but we need to stay connected to the families and what's going on for them, and not just making assumptions about what they need. And thank you for allowing me to be on this group for more than 3 years. I was here when we hired Morgan, so it's been really cool to see everything you've done, Morgan. I'm like, is it yeah, I definitely have everything that you've done, because I was around.
Yeah,
I was a BBF regional coordinator 7-8 years ago, and this looked really different, and you really turned it into an amazing thing that has done so much for kids and families in the state. So kudos to you and to everyone in this group, and thank you. And I'm sure I won't be a stranger.
Oh, I super don't want to follow that. For being so articulate. I think I feel really glad that I'm still the DNH designee for this council. So that makes me less sad. I said at the last executive committee for VBS that I was on, and this isn't something I think many of us say, you know, when you know some meetings are ending, there's a pretty big sigh of relief. And I don't feel that way about this, and I know I'll be in less meetings and less involved, and as it should be. Lisa, get to take that torch. And it is just been something I've learned a tremendous amount, and I'm really glad to stay working with this group and moving things forward, and so thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for being with us today, virtually or in person. Not all of our meetings are this fun and like a party, but we do want to invite you to keep showing up and keep being at the table. It is an incredibly tremendous, powerful group of experts really driving forward with the vision we have for Vermont's early childhood system. So thank you all for being here today, and we'll close out today's meeting.